In North Canton, Ohio, 5-year-old Ashley Zhao peacefully fell asleep in the back room of a restaurant owned by her parents. While her father briefly stepped out and her mother served customers, the girl vanished. Perhaps she slipped out through the back door and got lost. Or perhaps she was abducted by wrongdoers. No, the truth would turn out to be far more horrific than anyone could imagine. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Inside the restaurant, there aren't many places to hide something, but the problem is that almost every one of those places can be searched relatively easily. In the bathroom, the only spot is under the shower stall. A quick look there and the missing item would be found. The storage rooms and kitchen are the same. One person enters the room, and the game of hide-and-seek is over. Only one door remains, a steel one leading to a small metal cabinet. If you step inside and close the door behind you, it's as if you've been transported to another world through a portal, because as soon as the door slams shut, you'll hear wheezing, trembling, and worse. You'll stop feeling your ears and fingers. That's normal, because that's exactly what happens when you're locked inside a giant freezer. Naturally, this was one of the first places the police checked in their search for the missing girl. What if she accidentally wandered into the freezer and somehow got locked inside? They rummaged through baskets, bags of cheese and meat, but found nothing. The police aren't all seeing. They looked everywhere, on shelves, in drawers, even under the shower stall and inside the freezer, but the girl was nowhere to be found. This is the case of missing 5-year-old Ashley Zhao. On the roof of a small 4.5-meter tall building, 2 roofers were working. They climbed up at 10 a.m. to finish their tasks before the midday sun. One of the men walked to the edge of the roof and watched the parking lot. He was waiting for his partner to finish his part of the job. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to an SUV pulling up. There was nothing unusual about it. The roofer saw a man get out of the vehicle. Then a woman emerged from the passenger seat. They silently opened the back door and lifted a little girl, about 5 or 6 years old, out of a car seat. Her face wasn't visible because it was covered by the hood of a purple coat, as it was winter outside. The roofer watched as the parents carried the girl into the nearby restaurant and then forgot about what he saw until the police began questioning him. By the time the worker saw the 3, the man, the woman, and the little girl, one of them was already dead. On Monday, January 9th, 2017, a man dialed 911. Trying to stay composed, he told the operator that he couldn't find his daughter, who had just turned 5. When asked when the girl was last seen, the man replied that it was around 4 or 5 p.m. It was now 9 p.m., and the child was wearing a purple winter coat and gray leggings. The man then explained that he and his wife owned a small restaurant. In the back room, there was a small mattress where one of their 2 daughters sometimes slept while the parents worked. The couple had 2 girls, aged 5 and 6. The younger one was currently missing. The little girl had come to the restaurant with her father and mother. At first, she played in the back room and then fell asleep. While the mother cleaned the kitchen, the father drove to school to pick up the older daughter after a lesson. Then they busied themselves with tasks while the younger daughter slept. Dinner time arrived and the restaurant filled with customers. The husband and wife worked alone, with no other employees, so they were very busy preparing food and cleaning for a while. Only when the rush of customers subsided did the father go to check on his daughter. Opening the door, the parents saw that the child was gone. There were no security cameras in the restaurant, so they couldn't check if the girl had gone outside or if someone had entered the back room. Despite the fact that the caller's young daughter was missing, his voice sounded calm. Apparently, the father managed to push his emotions aside and focus on the search because excessive worry and hysteria wouldn't help find the little girl. Considering it was winter and cold outside, it was akin to being locked in a freezer. Let's not forget that a 5-year-old child had been missing for several hours in the freezing air. Many health inspectors avoid dining at restaurants. For them, it's much safer to cook at home than to visit a food establishment outside of work. This is because they've seen too many dirty cafes and restaurants that seem perfectly decent to the average customer. When a health inspector comes for an inspection, the eyes of the manager or owner speak louder than words. Usually, they try to delay the inspector in the dining area, while other employees attempt to conceal potential violations. Health inspectors are people doing good, honest work for the guests. But for restaurant owners, they are enemy number one. What they find in the kitchen, cafe, or refrigerators is something many can't even imagine. For example, one health inspector wrote online that in a well-known busy restaurant, there was a bucket under the cutting table where cooks urinated instead of going to the bathroom. Another wrote that a cook flipped a steak and there was a roasted cockroach on the other side. Customers themselves saw pre-cooked soup sitting on the dirty floor in 5-gallon buckets. Former employees of food establishments recounted how, before inspections, cooks would remove all expired food from the refrigerator, load it into their cars parked near the dumpster, and then bring it back. One guy who worked at a major fast food chain witnessed a colleague licking her index finger every time she separated a slice of cheese from the stack to make cheeseburgers, as if she were separating a sheet of paper from a stack. A health inspector recalled constantly receiving reports of black specks inside a vanilla ice cream machine. It turned out the machine's cylinder was infested with cockroaches, which were simply ground up and added to the treat as an extra source of protein. There's no need to mention the lack of gloves, hairnets, or expired products, as such things are common in most food establishments. Given how bad health inspections can be, the Asian cuisine restaurant Angel's in Ohio wasn't actually that bad. Angel's is a Chinese restaurant offering takeout. There were no tables for dining in. Customers simply came in and ordered food to eat at home. Most of the health code violations at Angel's involved improper thawing of chicken and repackaging meat in disposable bags not meant for food storage. Those were the inspector's comments. After these issues were addressed, another health inspection followed. On January 4, 2017, Inspector Christina noted in her report that during the inspection, she saw a little girl hunched over in a high chair in the back room. On the table were coloring books, crayons, a baby doll, and another toy. The child's presence and behavior caught Christina off guard. She asked the girl how old she was but got no response. The girl was very quiet and sat staring at the floor. She looked like a little ghost. The inspector found it strange to see a child in the restaurant, but the father reassured her, saying his daughter just didn't go to daycare that day. Nevertheless, a nagging sense of unease troubled Christina for days. She kept recalling the small, hunched figure of the child, who seemed to be hiding in the back room. The inspector spent about an hour and a half in the establishment, and the girl's posture barely changed. It all seemed strange. A few days later, 5-year-old Ashley Zhao went missing. The Zhao family, who owned the Chinese restaurant Angel's in Jackson Township, Ohio, consisted of 4 people: the father, Liang Zhao, and the mother, Mingmin Chen. They were raising 2 daughters. The older one, 6-year-old Jojo, everyone called her that, though it was a nickname, attended elementary school. The younger one, 5-year-old Ashley, spent a lot of time in the restaurant's back room. As mentioned, the restaurant had only 2 employees, the owners themselves. The menu featured 300 dishes, so it's easy to imagine how much effort the couple had to put in to keep the business profitable. A former delivery driver said that Mingmin and Liang were good people. However, he always felt that the head of the family dreamed of having a son. The man mentioned it more than once in conversation. Some customers, learning that the entire restaurant was run by just 2 people, were surprised. They had to manage order pickups, cook food, wash dishes, and clean the kitchen and dining area. It was too much for 2 people. It was simply insane. Neighbors who knew the Zhao family personally spoke highly of them, saying they were always very polite, if a bit reserved. The family seemed very private, but both girls appeared to be daddy's girls. However, now Ashley was missing, and the only lead the police had was that she might have gone outside and gotten lost. The restaurant's back exit led to a rear parking lot, with a dense wooded area nearby. This was a suburban part of Ohio. Ashley was 5 years old and could have wandered off anywhere. Or she could have been kidnapped. The police first checked whether any suspicious individuals had entered the restaurant. Liang said he noticed 2 guys who came to the restaurant twice, months apart. He remembered them because they asked strange questions. It even seemed to him that the strangers were trying to figure out which restaurant in the area would be best to rob. They asked how many customers came during the week, when the restaurant closed, and so on. Then the odd visitors likely realized there wasn't much to steal and moved on. But perhaps Liang was mistaken. Maybe they weren't there to rob. Maybe they were looking for something else. Soon, in the woods behind the restaurant, the police found their first clue: a pair of black shoes, too large to belong to Ashley. Most likely, they were men's shoes. Over 100 police officers searched the dense forest behind the restaurant all night. Volunteers from the local community assisted them. Other officers during the search spoke with regular restaurant customers who gathered that evening in the lot outside the establishment, praying for Ashley's safe return. One woman recalled every time she came to pick up food. The girl was always standing behind the counter, talking to her. The customer called Ashley a sweet creature and, with tears in her eyes, begged the police to find her soon. After all, there's no greater sorrow for parents than losing their own child. Everyone hoped the child would be found. But there was at least one person praying that Ashley would never be found. There are many ways to tell when someone is lying. Often, it's noticeable through unique nonverbal communication habits. When a person lies, their gestures and facial expressions suddenly change. Fleeting emotions appear that the liar can't hide in time. Share good news from your life with someone. If, before congratulating you and smiling, a grimace or smirk flashes across their face for a split second, know that they might not be genuinely happy for you. Obviously, when adults lie, contradictions arise. But can a child lie? Sometimes children make up stories when testing boundaries or learning to communicate, but in most cases, an adult can immediately tell when a child is lying because children don't yet know how to conceal their deception. One of the detectives searching for Ashley noticed her older sister, JoJo, in the restaurant. He decided to ask the girl what exactly happened to Ashley, where she went. JoJo looked around and, making sure no one could hear, whispered that her mom and dad forbade her from talking about what happened. The detective, from the other side of the restaurant, closely observed Mingmin and Liang and noticed something suspicious. Ashley's father was very nervous and gestured a lot while talking to other officers. That's natural, as his 5-year-old daughter was missing. But Mingmin's reaction, the mother of the child, was a bit strange. The woman seemed to have shut off all her emotions and barely spoke. The detective approached the father and asked for a recent photo of Ashley, to which Liang replied that he didn't take pictures of his children. He only had a photo of Ashley taken for an ID. The man handed the photo to the law enforcement officers. Some people firmly believe that lying on a polygraph and not getting caught is easy. In reality, there are many ways to deceive a lie detector. It's unfortunate that many polygraph specialists can't tell when someone is using deceptive techniques. It's really hard to detect, but it also means things can go the other way. That is, a person might tell the absolute truth, but it looks like they're lying. Ashley's father, Liang, was the first to be brought into the interrogation room. They started with control questions. Did he know the purpose of this test? Did he have any physical involvement in Ashley's disappearance? Then Liang, answering the polygraph examiner's questions, said that about a month ago he sought psychological help due to difficulties with his wife's immigration case. The thing is, in 2009, Mingmin tried to seek asylum in the United States, but was unsuccessful. She claimed she was persecuted by the Chinese government based on her religion, political views, and social group affiliation. Although Liang himself was an American citizen, he worried that his wife might be deported and didn't know what to do with the children in that case. On his only day off, Liang mostly did things for the restaurant. It was their only source of income, so there simply wasn't time for anything else. Liang gave up rest and entertainment. His current plans were to raise his children and provide them with a decent future. In fact, the man dreamed of having 4 children, but at the moment, that dream was unattainable. The polygraph test gradually turned into a full-fledged interrogation. The underlying feeling was that every lie you tell buries you deeper and becomes suffocating. The investigator asked Liang if Ashley had ever left the restaurant before, to which he replied that she knew how to open the back door, but never left the back room without permission. The questions were repeated and grew increasingly strange. Finally, Liang couldn't take it anymore and admitted he was a bit confused because he hadn't slept well the previous night. That's when the detective began gradually leading Liang to the possible events that could have led to the girl's disappearance. What was the likelihood that an accident happened inside the restaurant? Perhaps Ashley got burned by grease or something else and fell unconscious the next moment. The parents, afraid the police wouldn't believe them, hid the body. This was essentially an accusation of an unintentional crime. Unfortunately, such things happen too. The police had to consider all possibilities. The detective persistently pressed the child's father, urging him to tell the truth because too many people, helicopters, and canine units had been deployed to search for Ashley. But if Liang knew what really happened to his daughter, he needed to say it now. Liang stubbornly remained silent, pretending he didn't understand what was being asked. When the investigator suggested another possibility, that the parents sold the girl, the father immediately insisted it was impossible and then demanded the interrogation stop. Liang complained that, due to lack of sleep, he could barely keep his eyes open and practically begged the officer to let him go back to his wife and child. He outright said he was afraid of the test results. When the officer asked him to tell what happened to the girl, Liang admitted he was afraid for his wife. He started worrying that their whole family would fall apart, but didn't say anything specific. However, persistent persuasion and pressure took their toll. The man finally gave in. Liang said it was an accident and they didn't mean for it to happen. But now he'd go to prison because he hid the body. No more specific information could be obtained. The police combed the woods trying to find Ashley and checked the area around the restaurant. Now they opened the front door of Angel's again and began a search. It wasn't the first time they had searched the entire restaurant, but now they knew for sure they were looking in the right direction. The detectives methodically searched the entire premises, this time with much more patience. They went through the kitchen, the freezer, the dirty storage room, and the tiny closet where the mattress was. Empty. Suddenly, one of the officers noticed a ladder leaning against the wall near the freezer, and he immediately wondered, what was it doing there? The thing is, the police had been suspicious of this couple from the start. After searching the woods as much as possible, they decided to focus on the restaurant. One of the officers placed the ladder against the freezer and discovered something like a loft space. He removed one of the tiles and shone a flashlight into the small area. He saw photo albums with Mingmin and Liang's wedding pictures. The officer pulled out the albums and noticed several plastic bags behind them that emitted a foul smell. The detective carefully pulled out the bags and gently unwrapped them. Inside was dried fish skin. The officer was about to put everything back and climb down when he noticed a rectangular object tucked deep into the crevice of the upper storage space. It was a plastic container, the kind restaurants typically use to clear dirty dishes from tables. Not expecting to find anything suspicious, the officer still hooked the corner of the container and slowly pulled it toward himself. The container was quite heavy because it was filled with salt. Maybe the restaurant owners stored the salt up there to save space. But why so much salt? The detective didn't give up and began carefully sifting through the top layer of salt in the container. Soon, he found a black plastic bag inside containing Ashley Zhao curled up in a fetal position. All news outlets immediately published the shocking news. The body of missing 5-year-old Ashley was found in her parents' restaurant. fans of Chinese cuisine were stunned, especially those who had ordered food from angels that day. This meant that for 9 hours, while the restaurant operated at full capacity, serving customers and preparing food, the deceased daughter of the owners was hidden in the back room, stashed in a space above the freezer. To determine what caused the girl's death, the coroner had to remove all the salt covering Ashley's body, all those tiny white grains. The expert concluded that the cause of death was blunt trauma to the head and torso. Many officers didn't like the parents of the missing child from the start. Their reaction differed from most people whose children go missing. The mother didn't shed a single tear. She seemed barely concerned that her 5-year-old daughter was gone, while the father's mood kept changing. Mingmin and Liang had been trying for months to teach Ashley to call them mom and dad, but the girl stubbornly refused. Every time she saw Mingmin and Liang get angry about it, she would start crying and act erratically. Mingmin explained to the officers that Ashley was raised by her husband's parents and her paternal grandparents, and from early childhood, the girl considered them her mom and dad. It was hard to explain to a child not yet 4 years old why she had lived with her grandparents almost since birth. The next day, Tuesday, Mingmin and Liang sat in separate interrogation rooms at the police station. By then, Ashley's body had already been found, but the parents weren't told. At first, Mingmin unconvincingly tried to suggest that Ashley might have been kidnapped, but the detective conducting the interrogation interrupted her and said he had spoken with her older daughter, Jojo. At first, the girl was afraid to tell what happened to Ashley because her parents forbade her from doing so. But the police officer knew how to ask the right questions, and the girl confessed. In any case, a 6-year-old child wouldn't have been able to keep such a terrible secret for long and would have eventually spilled the truth. Just like with Liang, the detective tried to speculate about an accident to get Mingmin to talk, but the woman folded her hands on the table and sat like a statue. Then the investigator snapped. He asked why the mother wasn't even crying, even though her daughter was missing. However, Mingmin couldn't cry, and there was a reason for that. The detective leaned forward and, raising his voice, bluntly said that her daughter was dead. She was gone. She wasn't on the mattress in the back room. Her dead body was securely hidden in the restaurant owned by her parents. And now they could sit and play games all night, but he wasn't going to do that. As the atmosphere in the interrogation room grew heavy, the investigators left, leaving Mingmin alone with her thoughts. Then one of them returned and sat across from the suspect. He looked disappointed, tired, and displeased. The police officer simply couldn't understand how a mother could be so callous. The detective told Mingmin that the previous evening he was at home with his family. Before that, he had woken up at 5:30 a.m. and hadn't slept since. His job was to help people and give them peace of mind. When a 911 call came in from a worried father reporting that his 5-year-old daughter was missing, the officer dropped everything and went to search for the girl. He left his family because it was important to him to help find the child. So why wouldn't the mother of this girl do anything to make the police's job easier? The detective sat across the table from Mingmin and stared directly into her eyes. He didn't let her look away, and she didn't turn away, though her eyes were empty. When the investigator asked again what happened to Ashley, how she died, the mother quietly whispered that she killed her daughter, and then asked her husband to dispose of the body. She didn't want to do it. She had to take care of everything, starting with the restaurant, and she only had 2 hands. Sometimes she simply couldn't control herself. That was the end of Mingmin's eloquence. Meanwhile, Liang, Ashley's father, in the adjacent interrogation room, explained that his wife was essentially a good person and had never used physical violence against the children before. Their older daughter, Jojo, was already 6, and the most they allowed themselves was a light spank if she did something wrong. It couldn't be called physical abuse, as spankings were used in extreme cases and only as a disciplinary measure. According to Liang, Mingmin was a good mother, even if it was hard to believe now. But at some point, she started having problems. He began noticing that she often lashed out at Ashley, grabbing her by the arms, spanking her, or even kicking or hitting her. But she never did anything like that to Jojo. Liang explained that for the first 4 years of Ashley's life, she was raised by his parents, and since their younger daughter returned to her biological parents, the family faced difficulties. His parents called constantly, labeling Mingmin a terrible mother. They told her she was doing everything wrong, that she was raising Ashley poorly. Those words hit Mingmin hard. Their daughter was 4 years old, not potty trained, didn't know her last name, and didn't even understand whether she was a boy or a girl. The list could go on endlessly. The more her mother-in-law scolded Mingmin, the angrier she got, and the more Ashley's behavior irritated her, as the girl didn't know or understand anything. Whenever the girl did something wrong, the mother would get nervous and irritated. Ashley had been living with her parents for a year, but still hadn't learned to ask to use the bathroom. That day, Liang took Jojo to school. When he returned home, he learned that Ashley had soiled her diaper. Apparently, she felt uncomfortable, so she took off the diaper and accidentally dropped its contents on the floor. When Liang walked in, Mingmin was already angry. She struck Ashley's head against the carpet twice. The girl fell to the floor, but the father saw that she was breathing, making wheezing sounds. Since this wasn't the first time, Liang didn't intervene. About 5 minutes later, vomit started coming out of Ashley's mouth, and green liquid ran from her nostrils. The parents rinsed their daughter in the bathtub and carried her back to the living room. Ashley was breathing and seemed to be asleep. Moments later, Liang realized with horror that his daughter was motionless and no longer breathing. He tried to perform CPR, but it didn't work. Naturally, the parents panicked and decided they needed an alibi. They dressed Ashley in a winter coat, placed her in a car seat, and drove the lifeless child to the restaurant. That's when the roofer saw them. By that point, Ashley was already dead. Liang and Mingmin left their daughter in the back of the restaurant on the mattress, where she often slept and went about their work. Then the man drove to pick up Jojo from school. The parents deliberately showed Ashley to her older sister and convinced her she was fast asleep. That day, Jojo had a dentist appointment. While the mother left with the older daughter, Liang placed Ashley's body in a plastic container, covered it with salt, and hid the container above the freezer. It turned out the parents used their older daughter as an alibi, which is utterly disgusting and perverse. Later, Liang admitted he didn't think the police would suspect them and search the restaurant. He assumed the emergency services would log his call, search for the girl briefly, and that would be the end of it. He didn't expect they'd make him take a polygraph test and ask so many questions. Both Liang and Mingmin were afraid of losing their older daughter, their family, the restaurant, and the house they planned to buy. Everything they had worked so hard for over 6 years could disappear in an instant. The man was deeply upset about Ashley's tragic death, but couldn't let it affect his entire family, so he hid the 5-year-old's body, as there was no way to help her anymore. The spot above the freezer was chosen deliberately. It had good ventilation and was cool, preventing the smell of decomposition. When things quieted down, they planned to move the body elsewhere and make it seem like Ashley had gone missing. By the way, many online users suggested that Ashley might have had autism. At one point during the interrogation, Liang showed the police how his younger daughter often stood, which seemed to annoy him so much that he appeared to justify his wife's abuse of the girl. Many people with autism spectrum disorder have a habit of pressing their bent arms against their body, a pose even nicknamed T-Rex arms. Liang demonstrated to the detectives how his daughter stood. He stood on his tiptoes, bent his arms at the elbows and wrists, pressed them to his body, as often seen in pictures of dinosaurs, and then shifted from foot to foot. According to the father, Ashley did this frequently. Autistic T-Rex arms aren't just a quirky pose. They can be significant for people on the autism spectrum. This unique hand position or movement is closely tied to sensory characteristics and ways of coping with stress and other unpleasant experiences. Often, People don't even realize their hands take this position when they're stressed. For many children with autism, holding their hands this way feels more comfortable because it creates a sense of security and control over their body. This pose helps them better cope with environments that cause sensory overload. It's as if they're hiding within their own body. Liang continued complaining to the officers that his mother had cared for Ashley for 4 years, and now they had to correct her behavior. The girl's difficult temperament was a reminder to Mingmin that she was a terrible mother, as her mother-in-law called her. The woman often lashed out at Ashley but never touched Jojo. For 4 years, Ashley wasn't just not potty trained, she couldn't even eat on her own and had to be fed. She still sat in a high chair for toddlers because she didn't know how to use utensils or hold a cup. She had trouble digesting solid food because her grandmother kept her on a liquid diet. If the girl wanted to eat or drink, she'd go to the refrigerator and point at what she wanted. Apparently, Liang didn't understand or didn't want to acknowledge that a child needs to be taught essential skills. That's a direct responsibility of parents. But both he and his wife somehow blamed the little girl, who wasn't taught basic tasks. They said Ashley was almost like a baby in a 5-year-old's body, essentially shifting the blame onto the child. They never sought medical help. Liang was afraid a doctor would see bruises on Ashley's body and take action. Mingmin was already in the country illegally. Interestingly, many neighbors didn't even know the Zhao couple had 2 daughters, and only mentioned 6-year-old Jojo. During the interrogation, Liang insisted that when he and his wife went to prison, their older daughter should be sent to a foster family rather than his parents, because she'd become like Ashley, and then Mingmin would hate her too. During the investigation, the couple tried to shift the blame for their daughter's death onto each other. Mingmin's lawyers accused Liang of harming his wife and both daughters. The woman herself told a prison psychiatrist that her husband was responsible for Ashley's death. He forced her to take the blame, threatening that if she didn't, she'd be deported. Jojo would be sent to a foster family, and Liang would go to prison. On October 12, 2017, the trial took place. 29-year-old Mingmin Chen initially pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but ultimately agreed to a plea deal. Under this deal, she was sentenced to just 22 years in prison. Immediately after serving her sentence, the woman will be deported back to China. Meanwhile, Liang Zhao is serving a 12-year sentence for complicity in the crime. He will be eligible for release in 2030. During the interrogations, Liang Zhao showed no remorse regarding Ashley. He expressed remorse only once, when he learned he wouldn't see his daughter Jojo again. Many people in the community were baffled, writing that Liang and Mingmin seemed like kind, caring parents. No one could have imagined what they were capable of. Neighbors gathered outside the house where Ashley lived to honor her memory. They prayed together, leaving flowers and stuffed animals. Soon after the horrific incident, the restaurant building was demolished and rebuilt. But no one will ever forget the tragedy that unfolded there, and how short the life of poor little Ashley Zhao was. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.